Evening, sorry. It's exactly 7 o'clock. Welcome members and officers and members of the public, if there's anyone on the call. I don't think there is. Right. So before I open this meeting officially this evening, can we just do what I'm going to do and switch my phone off, just so we don't get any interruptions? Right, done. If for the remote participants, if they can keep their camera off and their microphone off unless they wish to speak, and ideally not use the camera facility, as this can affect the quality of the connection, although I think there's only 3 of you on the call at the moment. This meeting will be recorded and data collected during the meeting and will be retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy. Recording of the meeting may be added to the Council's website. Members accessing the meeting remotely should use their SPC or KCC laptop to participate virtually. If you join using the link, it may not identify you and you may not be recorded as in attendance. Members, speak loudly and clearly, and to switch off your microphone after you're speaking. Right, so welcome everyone to the Regeneration and Property Committee. Right, let's see who's in attendance tonight. We have the Head of Environment and Leisure, Martin Cassell. We've got the Head of Regeneration, Economic Development and Property and Interim Head of Planning. That's such a long title, Joanne. Joanne Johnson. We've got the Leisure and Technical Services Manager, Jay Jenkins. And we have the Strategic Programmes and Assets Manager, Kieran Mansfield. We also have from Democratic Services, Billy Attaway. So there's no fire drill tonight. So if the alarm sounds, please drag me out the room with you and exit via the indicated exits and the assembly point outside. Do not use the lift. Does anyone need any assistance? No? Good. Okay. Are there any apologies of absence?
Thank you, Chair. There's apologies for absence for Councillor Simon Clark, who's substituted by Councillor Dolly Wooster, Councillor Charles Gibson, who's substituted by Councillor Ben Martin, Councillor Shelley Cheeseman, who's substituted by Councillor Ashley Shill, Councillor Ashley Wise, who's substituted by Councillor Mark Last, and Councillor Lloyd Chapman, but he is attending online, and I can also see that Councillor Clark and Cheeseman are online.
Okay, that's lovely. Okay. Oh, sorry, Councillor Tucker.
Pete Marchington, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And that's for his absence. Okay. Members, we need to approve the minutes of the last meeting held on the 14th of November. That's minute numbers 406 to 413 as a correct record. Do we all agree? Agreed? Agreed. Lovely, thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest tonight? Anyone wishes to declare? Councillor Last?
Just to say that on item 9, it's actually in my ward, and I'm aware of that, so just to that I know what's going on.
Okay, that's fine. Doesn't preclude you from any discussion, that's fine. No problem. Okay, item 5, the Swell Memorial Bench Scheme, and I'll ask the officer, Jay Jenkins, to introduce this item, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Swell Memorial Bench Scheme report is in front of you this evening. Been asked to note the content of the report and recommend that the Swell Memorial Bench Scheme is not reintroduced along Minster Leys Promenade. Following a question raised at full council, a request has been made for this report to be submitted to this committee on the Memorial Bench Scheme, and in particular the Minster Leys Promenade area on the Isle of Sheppey. The council, we do run a memorial bench scheme across the borough. There are various areas covered by the scheme: open spaces, country parks, beach locations. We did previously operate the scheme within cemeteries, but that has been withdrawn because of the popularity of those venues. And similarly at Minster Leys, following a consultation in 2014, a consensus and the support that the number of benches be capped, and that and the area was removed from the scheme in 2017. We currently have 150 benches along the Minster Leas, and that runs from the White House across the Seathorpe Avenue car park. The existing benches do create an ongoing liability for us in terms of cleansing, repair and/or replacement. The proposal this evening, whilst we acknowledge the sensitivity of the issue, it is recommended that the current scheme continues to exclude Minster Leas. We do operate scheme in other coastal areas, and there are a number of those listed for you at 3.2. Alternative options, it's not considered to be viable because of the sheer amount of benches in this area. We believe that by reintroducing the scheme, this would lead to a number of complaints, mainly from those that have approached us since 2017. And the final alternative for us is to consider an alternative memorial opportunity at Minster, and this could be trees or plaques or something of that nature on the far end beyond on the beach huts. I'll pause there and take any questions.
Okay, members, I'll take questions. We'll get the questions answered, and then I will move for the debate, and then we'll have the debate section. So if you can sort of limit your thoughts until we get to the debate section. So questions, I have Councillor Whiting first, followed by Councillor Worcester, and then Councillor last.
Yeah, mine won't be a question, Chair, it will be a comment, so I'll leave it.
Okay, that's fine, no problem. Councillor Worcester.
Thanks, Chair. Obviously, it's a very, very popular scheme that was operating along the Leas, and I totally understand the officers' potential removal of the area. But when I've spoken to residents regarding this, there is the potential of looking at potentially other spaces in Minster, for instance, the Glen, and also the potential of looking at Barton's Point, because those are the two other areas where, for instance, we see a lot of residents spending lots of their time. And also we know that in those particular areas, other than the picnic benches at Barton's Point, obviously, and the play area benches, that there could be some scope for better furniture to support residents in enjoying those areas that could potentially be coupled with the scheme's intentions. And also my particular ask is if parishes could possibly be involved in, for instance, signposting residents to the scheme, and also potentially with partnering in this particular scheme that Swale offer. Thank you.
Can I just clarify what your question is there? Is it about asking about the other areas? Is it about Barton's Point and the Glen?
So that was two questions. One is about the potential of including other areas, and secondly is about also maybe potentially looking at partnering with the parish council on future input on the scheme in the area for Minster and Sheerness, actually.
Okay, thank you. Jay?
Both of those locations can be considered and would be considered as part of our current open spaces strategy for memorial benches, but we can re-signpost specific inquiries for Minster potentially to those two locations.
Okay, Councillor Worcester, satisfied with that?
Yes, and also just obviously parishes would be really interested in supporting you in that as well.
Apologies, including parishes.
Lovely. Councillor Last.
Yeah, in the introduction you said the council's got liability to the benches. Do the people not who own or have these benches pay for the upkeep of them? Because surely we as a council shouldn't be paying for that.
The bench scheme is a purchase and installation price. Ongoing repairs through vandalism, cleaning and so on is our responsibility, because trying to facilitate the owners to action those particular items would be a challenge to say the least. So it's part of our beach cleaning team's provision to look after the benches.
So if I could lead... Oh, sorry, Councillor Last, you might ask what I was going to. Go for it.
I just want to come back. So once a resident has purchased the bench and maintained the bench, we don't charge them to keep upkeep. Then I think we need to look at that. No disrespect, but we are cash strapped for money, and we're having to deal with benches which are vandalised and need replacing. There should be a fee for residents to pay. I'm not saying they cover the cost, but an annual fee. That's all I would say.
Jay, do you want to come back on that?
Well, we can take that on board. I'll have a look at that without a doubt. Thank you.
I suppose my lead on from that question, if I may, is it possible that the premium we charge for the bench and the plaque is that actually inbuilt within that is an element of service over a certain period of time? So you get round it the other way, you get the money up front rather than trying to rely on collecting it at a later date.
Yes, that is the case. Obviously, it does depend on the ongoing cost of each bench, depending on particularly those that are damaged quite badly through vandalism. Then that cost would be taken quite quickly.
Martin, would you like to come in?
If I can just add, obviously this fee and charge is set annually under the fees and charges process, so we do a review each year around the cost and install costs and try to obviously predict the future costs for the year. There is an element in there that is above the current install and capital costs, and so therefore there is a small contribution to that ongoing maintenance. But if you wanted us to, through the fees and charges, add in a really explicit ongoing cost, then that's something we can consider for next fees and charges.
Of course you can.
Yes, I think we need to. I think we need to look at a long-term cost for these benches.
Sorry, yes. Well, I think the officers have taken note of that, and we'll review that as well as part of the fees and charges. Councillor Kavanagh?
Thank you. Is there a particular life to a bench? Because someone can't buy one and expect it to last for 50 years. Is there a standard life, or is it that you decide when they are defunct?
We do try and purchase and offer the most robust available at that time, and I think we've had some experiences previously where historical benches have suffered through the wear and tear, predominantly weather-wise, far more than more robust benches that we've purchased 4 or 5 years later. The wear and tear is significantly greater on the lesser product. That would be reflective in the prices, but we would always be looking at trying to identify and offer more robust benches, or material for benches, sorry.
Councillor Kavanagh?
But is there a life to a bench? It cannot last for 50 years, surely. There must be an end to it at some time, or we're going to be paying an awful lot of money to maintain something that is beyond redemption.
I would need to take that on board in a sense of the period. I wouldn't want to commit to a period at all without checking that. We do have a manufacturer's warranty period with benches, but that tends to be a fairly short period of 1 to 2 years. And it does obviously depend on the location. So if you take a coastal location compared to a country park location, from an elements perspective, it's under greater pressure, whereas the vandalism aspect can affect all benches. So that said, we will look at, alongside the fees and charges, a period that we could commit to for a period of maintaining the bench.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, and then I've got Councillor Martin.
Yeah, it was one going back on that point. For longevity and materials, is there something you could put in place, say for instance if it is by the coast, that it's a recycled material that lasts for ages, and then something that's in nature, we could use wood and then it's fine, and that was that one. And then I was just intrigued by what you said about trees. Have we got zones that trees could go in, or bits of land that trees can go in?
At the moment, we've only identified it as a potential alternative option for the bench. We are aware of the far end of the land that the beach huts sit on that could be used. We haven't done any more at this stage than discuss it internally as a potential alternative to the actual bench itself as a memorial.
And Martin, would you like to come in?
Yeah, and obviously key to that is engagement with the various parishes and others that are that we would look to do that. So that's really saying, although we're saying no to benches, is there another option? Councillor Kavanagh, I absolutely, when you asked your question, it made me think of Only Fools and Horses and Trigger. It's how long is a broom and a head, so broom handle and a head. So I absolutely take on your point. If something, for instance, was burnt very early on in the process, then clearly we would look to replace it. But if something comes to end of life, my understanding is there's no perpetuity to said bench. And we already use recycled plastic because they seem to be the most robust benches now for new installations.
Councillor Thompson?
I was only just going to come back on the trees thing. It's on a few natural burial sites. It works well in that you don't have to maintain the site once the trees are planted, because they have a little map which you can then just put the name on, so everyone knows whose is what tree, rather than plaques for each tree, which is maintenance costly. But I'm very up for trees, for biodiversity and everything else. But
Okay, we'll round up on questions. Councillor Worcester, one last drib, and then we'll try and get into the debate.
I'm really sorry, I just forgot to mention that actually...
Is it a question?
There is natural seating. It's on Martin's point about the alternatives. And I just wondered, the answer will probably be a no, but the Lees has a natural seating built into the seawall defences. Have we actually considered any opportunity to add, for instance, memorial things to those natural seating areas, as opposed to, for instance, the benches, which I know are heavily used? You may say no, because obviously you don't want to adjust the seawall defences, but it's just something else to consider potentially.
We do and have already had conversations with the Environmental Agency about options on the seawall itself. Unfortunately, it is a sea defence, and therefore that's its primary purpose, and they are very understandably sort of adverse to anything being attached to it. We even need to go through a fairly robust process to attach a sign to it. So I would suspect that would be a difficult discussion with them. But doesn't mean we can't have that good discussion, of course, but I suspect it will be a no on that one.
Okay, right. I'm going to propose the recommendation set out before you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Whiting. Right, let's move into the debate. So, who wishes to speak? Councillor Whiting. Oh, yes, I did have you first on the list. Councillor Martin. Anyone else? All right, we'll start off with Councillor Whiting first.
Thank you, Chair. Can we get back onto the debate about what the motion is? Because the other discussion was very...
You're the first to speak, so sure.
The other discussion was very interesting, and I would suggest perhaps on the fees and charges, on the longevity, ongoing maintenance costs and all of that, we ask the officers to come back with a report later in the year before we set fees and charges, to see how we might address some of those issues, because clearly we can't be maintaining these for 50 years for the costs that we're charging. So I think, to sum up all the other bits, it might be useful if we could ask the officers to come back with a report to a future meeting to discuss those particular issues, and around the issues of creating alternative venues on green spaces, trees, etc. Because I think that's an interesting debate, but it's not what we were discussing tonight, which is the extension. I was pleased that it got on the agenda. I think it's important that when members of the public come to us as councillors with something that concerns them greatly, that we have the opportunity to bring it to a committee, which is what's happened here. This has been brought by a member of the public who's clearly got a major concern. I do accept fully that we're full up at that part of the Lees now, but it's still right, I think, after 6 years to review the policy and have a look at it. So I'm pleased we've managed to do that. But I've seconded the motion to carry on as per the recommendation, because I do believe it's probably the right thing to be doing. The only other thing I'd suggest, of course, is if we are looking at the alternatives, I understand what you're saying about the Environment Agency, but let's just keep the foot on the gas on that one if we can. But if we can look at this again in a future report, Chair, I think that would be really very helpful. The idea of plaques is something that the particular member of the public who raised this with me has suggested as an alternative. They also suggested time limiting. So if somebody bought a bench, they bought it for 3 years, and that bench was then available for somebody else to buy and purchase and put their own plaques on. That was another suggestion, so perhaps that could be fed into whatever we look at later in the year. I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Martin?
Purely based around those questions, I fully support the officer's recommendation on this one. I would suggest that perhaps rather than a review of the Swale Memorial Bench scheme, it is a review of the Swale Memorial scheme that comes forward, and we look at it in the whole of how long does someone purchase a bench for, how much is it going to cost, are we going to put a maintenance cost on that fee? It would appear that my colleagues opposite are keen to increase how much money we can get on that. So if it's not too much work for Martin and Jay, sorry, perhaps we could get that on the forward plan as well.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak on the motion? No? Well, I think we go to the vote then. So all of those in favour of the motion as recommended? That looks to be unanimous. Thank you, members. Okay. Right, moving on to agenda item 6. I think, Jay, you've got the pleasure of introducing that one too.
Thank you, Chair. This evening. First one is to discuss the outcomes of the consultation itself and the proposed responses, which are shown at Appendix 1. Secondly is to consider the items that are listed at 2.8 and recommend for inclusion or not into the policy. And thirdly is to approve and adopt the final draft of the beach hut policy, which is shown attached at Appendix 2. Sorry, my mouse has gone into overdrive, apologies. The beach hut policy took place in 2023 between the period of September and November. We had 29 returns, which are detailed at Appendix 1, as mentioned. Members are asked to consider these responses for inclusion or not into the policy itself. We currently have 55 beach huts in 2 locations across the borough. We've never had a formal adopted beach hut policy previously, and this will be the first time that's been in place. This committee did consider a draft of the policy in July 23 before moving to the public consultation. The policy also details future development plans of Phase 1 and potentially Phase 2, excuse me, which again is to, Phase 1 is for huts at both locations, and potentially Phase 2 is Minster in isolation. There are 3 particular comments that we've identified as potential inclusions, and they are listed with a policy position at 2.8. And the final point I would like to bring you to is that there is an opportunity to approve 1, 2, 3 or none of those items into the policy, and that's what we're asking for some clarity and decision on this evening. And I'll pause there, subject to any questions.
Okay, members, any questions? So, Councillor Whiting, is it a question? No. Anyone want to ask any questions? Dolly? Sorry, Councillor Worcester?
I do apologise. I've just realised that actually, obviously, I sit as Vice Chair of Minster Parish, which this actually falls into, so maybe I should have said that.
Declaration.
I do apologise for that. But I've spoken briefly on this policy beforehand, but I would like to ask, for instance, is there any sort of intentions going forward to make the proceeds of the beach huts a little more clearer as to where that sort of is going to go? So, for instance, on other areas of the council, we have, for instance, litter. The revenue generated from parts of that goes potentially back towards some projects to support that. And I think, for instance, that it might be interesting to explore, potentially, if that's possible, that some of the revenue that is drawn from these beach huts goes to support, for instance, the beachfront team, or projects that support litter clearance, which is heavily supported by residents and volunteers, especially along the Leas. And I think that would be a really nice nod from Swale Borough Council that some of that revenue from this project is funnelled in that direction. But that's my question about it. Thank you.
Sorry, yeah, Martin will answer that for you.
Through you, Chair. Councillor West, a really good point that some of the examples you used there where income is ring-fenced for a particular usage, that's a requirement under the legislation in relation to that. There's no such legislation in terms of beach hut income. Beach hut income is covered under the local, and I'm going to forget the legal term, but within the Local Government Act, there's a term that says there are some things that you can charge for that can be used to generate additional income to be able to cover all council services. So what I can say in answer to that is absolutely the income from beach huts is used to either add to or provide the services around the seafront. So for instance, allowing that money to come in means that we can afford to have the street cleansing contract, open the toilets, clean them, various other things. So income from services like this absolutely underpins delivery of local council services on those seafronts.
Councillor Worcester?
Thank you, sorry, Chair. Just to come back on that a little bit, I completely understand that as a councillor. I know we've had similar discussions before, but what I'm talking about is when we're looking at policy, is making it super duper clear for people that actually they're identifying that there's a policy in existence, they can understand it, and actually they really feel that it supports them in their area, because a lot of the questions that come back about beach huts are that they are given to people out of area, they come into the area, they use the resources that local residents pay for instance, the toilets that we've just put in and parking facilities and things like that. And actually, I don't know whether it's some sort of discussion about being fairly explicit, saying that actually there could be a way that, for instance, the Swale Estuary Group, which is the fantastic band of volunteers that often meet along that area and do clear up litter all the time, from natural as well as visitors dropping it, obviously. And I think it would be really nice to be explicit about how that is funneled back into services that support residents and groups that support that area that choose to do it, as opposed to are being paid to do it, if that makes sense.
Sorry, Martin, you can chip in there.
I mean, it's certainly not for me as an officer to decide how our budget's spent. That is for you as members. So therefore, my answer to that is, should you wish to allocate funds to alternative groups from our revenue budget, that's entirely possible. The income coming in from this allows us to make certain decisions. It's not necessarily directly ring-fenced for those activities, so that's perfectly within members' gift.
Yeah. I mean, it's unrestricted income and capital gain that can be allocated in accordance with how the coalition and any supporters allocate the resources. It's one of the few income profiles that's like that.
Sorry, I just remembered.
Carry on, Martin.
Hopefully I've included a line in the policy that says, and clearly whether anyone reads the policy and this becomes overtly obvious or not, but it talks about the annual income being used to offset the costs of seafront facilities.
I particularly appreciate that sentence, thank you.
Thought you might. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you. My question is regarding the second comment. It's lovely that someone might want to give 10% of any new developments to local schools or whatever. I don't think we can afford that. What I'd like to know is how well used is this hut at Laysdown? You see, my experience, when I was on the allotment committee, we had a local school that was given an allotment. The novelty wore off very quickly. What we need is these huts used very well. And can we afford to give someone something for free? I suspect we can't as a council. We have to at least pay our way. Thank you.
Martin, would you like to come in on that one, please?
I was hoping not to have to answer too many tonight. I think I can overtly say that it's Sheppey Matters that has that arrangement, and my understanding is it's really well used by their groups in terms of that. So I would definitely advocate for that. I think from my point of view, to help members decide, what we would look to. 10% of new developments is interesting because you don't want to necessarily keep, but you could, for example, debate whether it's one at each location and whether there's still a rental. So at the moment, as I say, they get a 50% reduction in the rental cost. So that's something we could put into the policy. If we did it at that rate, what that does is cover the ongoing maintenance. Because the hut remains the council's property, it would cover that ongoing maintenance and cost to the council.
And I'm going to bring in Kieran here because he's got something very useful about UK SPF.
Yeah, I was just going to say where huts were specifically for community use, there is the potential for using an external funding pot to support the construction or the purchase of the hut. So. But it would have to be explicitly for community use.
So I think the question for clarity here is where we allocate for a community use, and I'm not reading minds here, but I suspect we'll get into that debate in a minute. But where we allocate one for community use, if we allocate a partner to manage that effectively for us, we're going to be charging something, is what we're saying. And it's going to be about 50%, and it will cover us. Yeah. And then there's the possibility of UK SPF funding for the actual construction of the unit. So actually, that sounds like quite a good deal from where I say. Right, so on that merry note, unless anyone's got a burning question, I shall propose the motion. Sorry, I shall propose the recommendation as set out. Have I got a seconder? Sarah, thank you. Okay, right, on to the debate. Who wants to speak? Councillor Whiting.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with recommendations. I think 1 and 2 are quite straightforward. 1 and 3 of the recommendations are quite straightforward, and I would support those. On recommendation 2, I think we need to look at each of the 3 separately, but I think the first one, I would agree with officers. We've probably covered that already in the policy and doesn't need any further action. I think the third one, similarly, we've covered it in answer to Councillor Worcester's question. It does say in there 72 to 89% of huts are used or rented or bought by local people. So I think that is well covered already in the policy. With regard to 2, I think the discussion that's just taken place I'd fully support, which is we have one beach hut available for community use, managed by somebody like Sheppey Matters, who pay a 50% rental charge for it. And if we can get others built using external funding, another one built, for example, and we can have a similar arrangement with another organisation, then I think we should. And I think that's probably quite easy to write into the, hopefully not controversial, and can be written into the policy. So they would be my comments. Thank you, Chair.
No problem. Members, does anyone else wish to come in? Councillor Worcester.
Thank you, Chair. There is a significant portion of the residents in Minster. I can't speak for Laysdown, but I can speak for Minster to say that actually they are very concerned and have been concerned through the life of this generation of this new scheme with regards to the wildlife and how it's going to be affected in that area. And I don't think I can let this item pass in the agenda without at least mentioning those concerns from residents. And hopefully I would assume that as a biodiverse and caring council, that those concerns are being looked at all the way through the construction process and have been considered through this policy. But that was a significant pushback with regards to my residents coming forward. But I will be supporting this item because I feel that the budget position at Swale, this is quite an important part of that, and I'll be following this. Even though I'm subbing on this committee tonight, I will be following this, and hopefully it brings fruits that Swale is predicting it to bring. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Worcester. I'll bring in Jay here because I think he might have something useful to help you here.
The question around biodiversity in the wildlife, there will be biodiversity surveys undertaken prior to any construction works taking place on the new build. Obviously, the policy covers the existing stock as well, and that will be considered as part of the wider policy. But I think the key message is that we will work with, if and when there is an appointed contractor, we will work with those with that company to ensure that the programme, the delivery and the final product is in line with anything we find within the surveys, and it has the least disruption as possible.
Yeah, can we silence phones, please? It's quite loud. Tut tut, you didn't listen to my instructions, did you? Councillor White, sorry, Dolly, did you want to come back?
I think residents will be really relieved that we're at least considering it and thinking about it on every step. I know we're not going to come to decisions that are going to absolutely fit everybody's need for one area. It's impossible. But we do have quite unique wildlife needs in that area, from newts to birds of prey. And I know residents would like to retain that as part of one of the major reasons why lots of people actually visit that area in the first place. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Martin?
Yeah, and we would completely agree. You've got somebody with two hats here. I'm looking after beach hats tonight, but clearly run the climate and ecological emergency programme as well. So from that point of view, you can be assured that that's that consideration. We could empty our waiting list overnight at Minster Leys by putting them all the way along and, you know, stacking them high. That's absolutely not in our proposals because of exactly that reason. The area certainly further down, that's why we've restricted it in how far we think we can go along. It leaves that massive area plus behind in terms of that biodiversity. So as I say, whilst we manage the development site quite carefully, there is so much other area around it that, you know, we're comfortable with the impact in terms of that.
Okay, Councillor Whiting, did you indicate?
Just a quick question for clarification, if I may. It's just about the planning, because the environmental stuff would get covered through the planning process, presumably, in any event, for the new builds at least, hopefully.
So it's done under permitted development rather than planning, on the basis of the size and the height and the fact that technically they are temporary. From that, so there wouldn't be necessarily a planning application where we would have to do that, but the council clearly wants to be an environmental steward, I think is our current wording in the corporate plan, and so therefore, you know, we absolutely want to go through the steps that are needed to cover that off.
Thank you. Councillor Kavanagh?
Thank you. Back to what Kieran said, I'm quite happy for there to be another community beach hut, for want of a better description. But if we're agreeing that, can we say it's subject to getting the funding? Because I don't think we ought to be paying for a beach hut and then just getting the money for the maintenance back. Is that clear?
It is. I mean, I can't sit here and promise that the funding would be available, but it is something that is at the present time entirely within the control of the council. and there is officer delegations to approve the grant making process. So, having discussed it, albeit briefly, with officer colleagues, I think that the hut quite easily fits into one of the grant schemes that is being operated, so I don't foresee problems.
But if we don't get the funding, perhaps it just needs to be a normal beach hut as opposed to a community beach hut.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask Martin for a response here.
What I would say in response to that is, whilst absolutely I would love the capital to be covered, the capital, we do include a markup on the sales price of huts, and so therefore our cost price is lower than that, and therefore we would still recover the cost of capital plus the ongoing maintenance through that 50% payment on that particular hut. It obviously reduces down how much we would get on a commercial rent, but we wouldn't be out of pocket. It would just be a longer payback period.
Thank you.
Okay, so perhaps if we can get some clarity from the committee if they're supporting a community hut in each location, if that's a general yay or nay, it's a nodding. I suppose my ask is that the organisation we asked to run this is that this is suitably well advertised, because I think I pick up your point, Anne, Councillor Kavanagh, about is it going to be used, but also we don't want it being used by just a select little niche group of certain, maybe just the Scouts or this, because it occurred to me today, like there's a number of schools that do beach school, and actually having a beach hut for a couple of days, etc., or for a period of time would be useful. So a diverse group of, having it open to the voluntary sector would be great. So I've been wafted a piece of paper here, and it says that we will allocate a minimum of one beach hut per location for the subsidised use of voluntary and community sector organisations. This will be delivered through an anchor organisation who takes responsibility for the hut and usage, and in return they will receive a 50% reduction in their annual rental figure. And that's the proposal that the officers are recommending goes into the policy wording. Are you all, does that sound? Councillor Whiting?
Sorry, Chair, did you say minimum or maximum? Because I thought we were suggesting one at each site, which would be a maximum number, not a minimum. Because a minimum, because we could have 10 on each site.
Yeah, no, one on each site, yeah.
Maximum.
Yeah, maximum. Okay, sorry, Councillor Braun. Okay, fine, you're picking up the same point. Anyone else on that particular issue? So it sounds as a committee we have broad consensus on that item. Councillor Whiting. Yeah, that's what I was going to... Oh, you're running ahead of me. Okay, right. So we're going to go for all three recommendations en bloc. Well, indicate, please, if you could all vote as to whether you agree with the officers' recommendations. Me as well. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, lovely.
That's with the addition.
And that's with the addition that I read out. Correct. Lots of nodding. Good. Lovely. Thank you. Happy with that? No, you need to cross that. Maximums and or minimums and maximum. Okay. Right. Thank you for that. And thanks also to the members of the public who responded to the consultation. I think that should be acknowledged. We now have agenda item 7. I'm going to bring in Joanne Johnson. This is the forward plan. This is on page 19 of your agenda.
Thank you, Chair. So a quick look at the things that we have coming up for the next meeting, whenever that will be, date to be determined by full council. Members will recall in November last year we discussed the property asset strategy, and we said we would bring forward for consideration a related disposals policy and community asset transfer policy. So this will be to approve the launch of consultation on those draft documents. We had a request from Sheppey Area Committee that we review the membership of the Levelling Up Fund member working group. So that has found its way onto the agenda. And then we have the Beach Hut tender, so a second stage, I suppose, to the policy. And from tonight, we have, I guess, memorial policy refresh to pick up on the queries raised around not just benches, but fees and charges, time limiting, other memorial options. I won't put a date to that because it sits with Martin and Jay's area. I won't presume to decide when that may be. Officers are working through a service planning process linked to the corporate plan. So the forward plan will start to look more populated going forward once we have the service plan, setting out other things that we'll be bringing to you at future points in time. Thank you.
Joanne stole my words there. So about the service plan coming from the corporate plan. So hopefully we'll see, and I'd like to see obviously this more populated as we go forward, and I think that'll be much easier. Councillor Whiting.
Thank you, Chair. Just thank you for that, and I'm glad that we included in that last item. I just want to try to make sure, it's difficult to set a date now, but to make sure that we discuss it in time to feed into all the budget discussions for next year, and we're not left overrunning in such that we're setting policy at P&R without knowing actually what the committee wants to do with its own policy. Thanks.
Martin, would you like to come in there?
Yeah, we'll take that away. I think we're just waiting on the new civic year timetable of meetings. I'm looking at Billy. So at the moment, both that one and the Beach Hut tender is fairly tight for June. So if we can't make it in that time, then whenever the next one after that is when I envisage bringing both of those items.
Okay, Councillor Worcester.
Thanks, Chair. On your future decision planning for this committee, you've got what was already said, the item that come up at the area committee. And obviously I feel that would be better done as soon as we can, because we're now seeing that it wasn't just the levelling up. When it was gone into public consultation, the levelling up scheme, there was two options available, which were obviously the first phase ideas, and then residents came forward with a lot of interesting ideas that would build us option 2 or level 2 ideas that would come from the back of the levelling up, if that made sense. So initial ideas would be got other ideas as well. That I feel needs to have very local input, and I'd like to promote the idea that came up at the area committee that we would like to see more Sheppey councillors involved in the decision making around the levelling up. I know what's been done already is really good and satisfies the regulations, and all those councillors that are having input we're very, very grateful for. But I think now is the time to really think about having that local voice, and it is incredibly popular with residents on Sheppey that local councillors from Sheppey would have input in those discussions. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll bring Joanne in on this. This is her expertise. But I think as the programme develops, certainly that second area, option 2, or the latter stage, I think we're some way off it yet, so I don't feel the panic that you may feel, although from the residents I'm sure they're putting pressure on you, but we're quite a long way off even getting through delivering the first stage yet. So I do understand that that they want to lay those down, but I don't think there's an immediate necessity. But Joanne, come in, please.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this is the next opportunity that we can bring the report. This is the next meeting to be scheduled. The steer from Area Committee was quite clear that it was about bringing in additional members from the island. So that's exactly what that report will be recommending, is increasing the number of people with local knowledge that feed into the member working group, whilst retaining political balance was also a condition of the Area Committee recommendation. Thank you.
That's brilliant. That's answered my question. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. Councillor Whiting?
Yeah, it's only a small point. I'm just trying to understand the sort of the logistics of all this, because presumably the working group would be set up, but it is a subcommittee of this group, isn't it?
It's a working group.
The working group is.
It was a working group. It doesn't make decisions. It is for information and, you know,
Yeah, that's right.
early stages, yeah.
And when we get to phase 2, I would have thought that this committee would want to look at what phase 2 involved.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then appoint a working group to take away the detail. So I wonder whether we're just jumping ahead of ourselves a little bit, and I'm with you a little bit, Chair, on what you said just now, that perhaps it will come in time, but perhaps not.
It will, yeah. I mean, we've got more pressing issues, quite honestly, which is the delivery, which is the working group is around the delivery of this scheme. I think my view is that it should be broadened to more local members to understand, so we carry them, and maybe it might help us with some internal comms. I'm not sure it probably is as exciting as they think it might be. Sorry. Sorry, Joanne. But no, it is discussing areas of topics, but not making a decision as such. So it gives some sort of, I suppose, steer on outline matters, and I'm more than happy that the locals come to that. So that's the next opportunity is in June, but as we go through that process, opportunities will rise, and actually that's what the working group's for, and we can put them on the list and then start banding those together for our second stage, as it were. So that's my view. Councillor Worcester.
Sorry, I think I overly put the overemphasis on phase 2.
Yeah.
I understand that these conversations grow,
Yeah.
and the whole point is looking at value for money.
Yeah.
So, for instance, it's trying to add that local voice in so that we can add value to phase 1 or phase 2 works to make sure that working party or people making decisions just have full access to information that potentially those people who are working that ward, that can, that area can feed into that at the easiest opportunity to make members' lives easier, certainly not to stand in any sort of contradiction to work that's already happened, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's fine. One useful thing is looking at the comms strategy, which has already been agreed, but it gives you some idea of the progress of the project and the stages at which we'll be releasing information. So, I mean, I can always get that sent round to members again, can't we? Members on this committee, so that everyone's got a copy of that, just so that they've got it to hand. Okay, right. Anything else on the forward plan? Does anyone want to raise? No? Marvellous. Right, we shall move on then. So, this is... Right. Item 8 is the exclusion of the press and the public. So, we will be discussing, I think that's without doubt, an exempt report. So we need to exclude the press and the public. So I'll read out here. This is for members. Do we wish to decide whether to pass a resolution set out in respect to the following item, that under section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and the public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act. 3, so information regarding to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. Please note that we will stop recording, so members online will be excluded from this debate. However, we will go into a public session afterwards to announce the results there. So, members, can we all agree this? Agreed. Is that done now? No. Have we switched into live mode?
It's just loading up.
Oh, okay. You tell me when we're free to go. So do we do the vote as well?
We're all good. Yeah, you just sort of say all of it.
Okay, members, we're going to vote. Okay, this is public session now. We're now live.
Absolutely. Those people that logged into this meeting that actually wanted to hear that, so will they be, obviously they'll be able to follow it afterwards if they're really interested in what...
Not the blue paper section.
No, obviously, but
yeah.
I mean this bit, because we had 3 now, they might not log back in, mightn't they? So they can follow it later on,
that's right.
Thank you.
That's correct. So, agenda item 9, we're going to vote on the recommendations that were set out before us. So, all of those that agree to the recommendations. Okay. Thank you. And abstentions? That's 1. Okay, so the recommendations are carried as written. Thank you. Okay, on that cheery note, we have completed the agenda tonight, so thank you all for attending, and I close this meeting at 8:37.